This happened in our former home, an old house way out in West Virginia that housed many bad memories for my family and I. We live in another state now. We're the only ones who have ever lived in that house. It was built and never sold until my family and I bought it. I've always thought that spirits and entities were attracted to negative emotions and outbursts, which happened a lot in my old house. In addition, my father was going through hard times at the time, with his job, money, the usual. The old house is a one-story place with a basement. It has 3 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was the master bedroom, and they gave that to my oldest sister. That's because my 2 teenage sisters needed their own rooms, as did I when I grew older. My parents used to sleep in the master bedroom for a while, but since they needed to give it to my sister, they separated a part of the basement off and made it into their bedroom. One night, my mother was lying beside my father in their bed when she noticed a mist hovering over my father, who was fast asleep. My mother thought it was her mother, but our dog started barking, and she knew something wasn't right. However, she thought it'd be best not to wake up her husband and scare him. The next night, however, she was fast asleep, and my father was awakened. My sisters and I would sometimes come down to my parents' room at night to talk to them because we were scared. When my father awoke this night, he noticed what he thought was my youngest sister standing in the doorway. The figure was dressed in white and had blonde hair. My sisters had blonde hair too. "You okay, sweetie?" he said, tired and irritated to be woke up. The figure, whom he thought was my sister until now, turned its head in confusion, much like a dog would. My father's face turned quickly from tiredness to terror, his eyes wide open and the hairs on his arms sticking up. He realized the figure did not know he could see it. That is why it looked confused. He also realized it wasn't my youngest sister, for all the lights were off, and when she came down to the basement, she was too scared to not have them on, and would turn on as many lights as she could. Then its face began changing, from my youngest sister's face to my grandmother's, then to my aunt's. My father began yelling loudly to my mother, "Turn on the light!" He kept trying to wake her up. She finally did and turned on the light as he asked. She asked what was wrong. He wouldn't talk to her for about half an hour, though. When he finally told her, she was shocked and admitted what she saw the other night. My dad said that the figure he saw dispersed into a mist after my mom awakened. My parents thought it could possibly be my mother's mom's spirit, as my youngest sister did look like her. Today, however, I think my dad believes it was a familiar, though my mother is convinced it was malevolent. If you don't know, a familiar is an entity who disguises itself as a loved one or someone you know. I've heard of them asking to come into someone's house or luring someone towards them, disguised as someone they love. But I think this one was invited into our home by means of negative emotion and outburst. I believed it to have been a demon in the form of someone we know. We have since blessed the house in the name of the Lord, and there have not been too many odd occurrences afterwards. Just beware. If you live among negative energy and emotion, you might just invite something in, something harmful, something you weren't expecting. It was only recently that my family and I moved into our first purchased home. Now, debt isn't the greatest thing, but having a mortgage kind of feels like it. We rented forever, never really feeling like we had control over what we lived in, but now we do, and I don't think we could have been happier until the sightings started. We live out in the rural part of a rural town. In front of the house, there's trees for miles, and behind it, more trees for more miles. Yet somehow we can get internet up here, which is a godsend. The one neighbor we have is extremely quiet, so it's really peaceful here. As soon as we moved in and got everything settled in, we wanted to start a garden, planting fresh fruits and vegetables, even bought a couple of rose bushes, which really accented the old fence that was already on the property when we arrived. Everything sounds good so far, I know, but one thing I didn't like about the place was the master bedroom. Sure, it was big enough, but the side of the bed that I slept on was close to a large window. A window that, honestly, kind of creeped me out. That may sound childish for an adult to say, but I'll be frank with you. I don't think I ever got over my childhood fear of the dark. Not entirely. There would be nights where our rotating fan would cause the curtain to kind of lift away from the window, then fall back down, every so often revealing the outside to me, and me to the outside from the glass. I would often lay awake at night sitting there, watching the curtain rise and fall, seeing through the glass, wondering what might appear there one day, wondering what was in the woods beyond the fence that could be looking back. I've always had a morbid mind about things. I'm the kind of guy that, if you find me on a cliff's edge, I'm probably thinking, I wonder what it'd be like to just jump off. From that window, you could see the fence and the forest beyond, as well as some of our garden. In the morning, it was quite a delightful sight, something nice to wake up to. Every morning when I rose out of bed, I would first open that curtain and get a good look outside. But I never dared to open that curtain myself at night. This brings me to my first experience with the thing that seemed to haunt our property. My wife was fast asleep. It was around 4 a.m. Something you should know about me is that I've always struggled with sleep problems. They often came at random. I could go weeks with sleeping just fine, and then there would come nights where I just couldn't sleep. No matter how long I sat there with my eyes closed, no matter how comfy I was. It was one of those nights. I had laid there for literally around 6 hours as we went to bed at 10. My eyes had been closed the entire time. I wasn't stressed or anxious or anything. I'm not really sure why I couldn't sleep. God, do I hate nights like that. I wasn't facing the window at that moment. But at one point I decided to flip around to give that side a try. As I did so, I glanced at the window and saw that the curtain was rising, thanks to the fan stirring it up. I quickly, almost instinctively shut my eyes, because I didn't really want to know what was outside the window. To aid in my feeling of security, I pulled the blankets up to my cheekbones, which caused the blanket to overlap my vision in a way that covered the window. I was snug then, and I tried to go back to sleep. The sound of the ceiling fan and the rotating fan, both whirring, while my wife snored lightly here and there. It was peaceful, but there soon came another sound. It was coming from in front of me, just beyond the wall where the outside was. It was a heavy but slow and deliberate thud, like the footstep of a careful but heavy man. After the third thud, it stopped for a while, and I was trying to come up with explanations as to what it was. Maybe it was a pine cone falling from an especially tall pine tree, which we had plenty of around the property. It could have been a bear, but I didn't think one could get over the fence, not without me hearing it. As it went quiet from that side again, I closed my eyes and focused once more on rest. 1 second, 2 seconds, 20 seconds went by, and the sounds came back. Another slow, steady couple of thuds. They were getting closer to my window. That night was a full moon night, and the way the moon sat in the sky, it beamed almost directly through my window, a pale gray-blue nightlight that would usually help me fall asleep, but not that night. As the thuds grew closer to the window, a figure overlapped the moonlight, causing me to see a very detailed silhouette behind that curtain. More than ever, I prayed that the curtain did not rise again. Without even knowing what I was doing, I had lowered the blanket from my cheekbones. I had a full view of the curtain, which now sat motionless against the window like it should have been. Yet I knew at any second the fan would come rotating back around and cause it to rise again. Thanks to the brightness of the moon, this silhouette was very, very clear, looking more like a sharp outline than a blurred shadow. What I saw, it really disturbed me. It was tall. The sharp tips of its ears reached the top of the window, which was nearly to the ceiling. From the top of its head down to its shoulders, it was furry, with long, ragged hair. It looked like a disheveled lion's mane. I could also tell it was standing on two legs, but when I looked down at its legs, I saw a bend in them that was backwards and angular, as if you had someone standing straight up and you kicked their knees in as hard as you could. Seeing this made me swallow hard. I kept looking though, going from its knees to its shoulders, which were broad. It was like some sort of demented incarnation of a burly, bearded mountain man. That's what I was hoping it was. A man. I think dealing with some sort of intruder or peeping Tom would have been much easier to handle in my mind. But then my dog, which we kept in a different room overnight, barked, causing the figure to turn its head at a 90-degree angle. Whatever it was, it had a snout. It was no man. I pulled the blanket back up over my eyes, and I prayed that it would go away. I prayed that this was a nightmare. With a thud, and another few thuds, the figure disappeared, and I heard no more thudding sounds for the remainder of the night, which I did not sleep. Rather, the following day, I slept a couple of hours on the couch. I did tell my wife about this experience, which creeped her out almost as much as I was scared. Having no further experiences for the next couple of months, it was at the back of our minds. Every now and then, I would wonder what it was. But I think by then I'd convinced myself it was a misshapen and exaggerated shadow of some small animal. Nothing to be scared of, I thought. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Every night before bed, I take the dog outside, walk him around the property. We usually go along the fence together, because he enjoys taking in the smells between the fence posts. This night was not a full moon. I remember it being a crescent shape instead, so it was awful dark. I found myself speeding along the fence until I reached where the floodlights are at the corner of the house, which lit up a particular part of the fence, but only that part. The rest of it was quite dark and shadowed. My poor dog, who wasn't on a leash by the way, always felt the need to follow me when we were outside, and since I was power walking my way to the floodlight every lap of the fence, the poor guy felt as if he didn't have enough time to sniff his usual spots. By the 4th or 5th lap, I felt as if I was getting enough steps in. I figured another would do it. I would start one more lap, beginning at the floodlight. But I never got that extra lap, because as we made it to the lit corner of the fence, my dog stopped and started to growl. A very subtle and low growl, one that I almost didn't hear at first. It was like he was frightened, too frightened to growl normally. "What's wrong, boy?" I said. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes glued to one part of the fence. I looked at that part, didn't see anything weird, then looked back. Still, he wouldn't budge. He would only breathe, then continue that low, weird growl. What is with you? I thought. I decided to be a little bit more thorough and walked closely to the fence. Having a bit too much bravery thanks to the floodlight, I slapped 2 hands at the top of the fence, preparing to lean over it, until I looked straight ahead at the top of the fence between my hands. I didn't see it before. When I was looking back and forth from my dog's gaze to the fence, I had been tracing or following his eye level, as that's where he'd been looking. But when I placed my hands at the top of that fence, there was a third hand in between mine. One whose skin was a pale blue or gray, with patches of gray or silver hair all over almost randomly. And this hand, it was twice as large as mine, whose fingers ended in wretched and almost rotten-looking nails. Sharp nails. I stood frozen, horrified. I couldn't believe I let myself get this close to something this bizarre. What even was it, though? Whatever the hand belonged to, it was using the fence to lower itself and prop itself against. I could hear it. It was sniffing the ground on the other side, getting the scent of something. Keep in mind that this is a privacy fence. It was 6 feet tall. Being a shorter man, about 5'10", I would have to jump, pull myself up, or stand on my tiptoes to be able to look over. But I was not about to do that. If that thing on the other side, crouching down, was too preoccupied to have noticed me and my dog, we were going to keep it that way. I took my boy inside, and we shut the door as quietly as we could. Yet despite how quiet and calm we seemed, my heart was pounding, racing a mile a minute. I don't think it had ever beat so fast. I quickly went to my wife and told her. The two of us ran back to the door, which had a window on it, facing the backyard. I pointed out the hand, and she saw it too, plain as day. But within the next few seconds, that hand slowly sort of just slid down from its position, reminding me a lot of that scene from Jurassic Park when the T-Rex's hand sort of just flops off the wire. We never did see it stand up. Maybe it wasn't 6 feet tall, or maybe it crouched down there longer than we thought it did, and when it did get up to leave, we weren't there to see it. The thought of that really scares me. This brings me to the final sighting I had so far with this thing. At this point, my wife and I were quite aware that there was something creepy, something weird, lurking in our neck of the woods. After that night with the weird hand, we stopped letting the dog out on its own during the day. Day or night, we would be out there to walk with it within the fence. I don't know what I would do if that thing climbed the fence again, if it was the same thing as before, and did something to my dog. But once again, the months go by, and time has this way of making things in the past seem less of a big deal. It can soften trauma, make light of the dramatic, and soon the sightings I had had with this creature became nothing more than coffee table talk with family and friends that we would invite over. It was a joke now. Oh, it was just a man in a werewolf garb trying to scare you. Nah, what you saw was Bigfoot. He just wants his privacy too. Those were the things that were said. I was foolish not to be scared. I started to want to get in shape again. I had put on a decent bit of weight over the recent winter, so I saved up for new running shoes and some running clothes, as well as a Fitbit, and I started to jog the dirt road circle we lived on. It was about a mile-long loop. I would go down the driveway, go right, and eventually I'd come back on the left. One particular day, we were busy in town for way too long, so when I got home, figuring that I could still fit in my nightly mile, I threw on my running clothes and went out. It was about an hour and a half later than usual, and I way overestimated how much more daylight was left. Because halfway through the mile, to my suspense, the sun was down, and it was dark. Imagine yourself alone in the dark on a mountainous road with woods for miles to the left and right. The only way you can go is a half a mile through more bends on the road before finally making it back home. That was the situation I put myself in. Part of me wanted to run as fast as I could the rest of the way, but when I tried, I stopped after a few seconds Because my running was so loud, it made it impossible to hear clearly around me, and the thought of not being able to hear around me correctly made me feel more panicked. So instead I walked lightly. That way I thought I'd be sure I would hear something if it was coming up on me. Luckily for me, it was a brighter, nearly full moon that night. I think it was called a waning gibbous. I can't be sure though. But there was plenty of light to see up and down the road. The trees to my left and right were awfully big, sure, but they didn't really stretch out over the road. With the moon where it was above me, there was enough light to light my way. That's why when I looked back at one point, I saw it all too clearly. That same silhouette I'd seen in bed so long ago. Tall, pointed ears, ragged mane, backwards bent legs. I saw that dark figure standing, quite obviously taller than my privacy fence, about 20 yards away from me. Way too close. It was just standing there. I couldn't tell if it was facing away from me or towards me. I tried to breathe, but choked. I didn't stop walking. I instead started walking backwards, watching this thing. The entire time I repeated the phrase, "Oh no," in my head at least 100 times. As I began taking steps, careful steps, the figure began to walk too, its arms rising and falling at its sides the way a person would walk. So was it a person in a suit? Someone who decided to terrorize me in a very realistic-looking suit for months? Yeah, that's all it was, I reminded myself. So, having convinced myself of that, I called out to the figure as I walked. "That's not funny. You need to leave me alone. Keep it up. I'll dial the cops." I pulled out my smartphone and clicked the lock button, causing the screen to light up. Then I pointed the screen in his or its direction. They didn't flinch, but kept walking, its steps much larger than my own. It was steadily catching up to me. When 20 yards became about 15, I began to make out details. Patchy silver hair all over, skin that was a gray or gray-blue color, hands with long, sharp nails. This was almost certainly the same creature I saw with its hand on the fence that night. Suddenly, it broke into a full run. Mock me all you want, but I screamed like a child as I turned forward again and started to run, but immediately slid on the dirt road, rocks rolling underneath one of my feet, causing me to fall and scrape my right hip. Now on the ground, I faced the thing running at me, and without full control over my panicking body, my palms raised up to my eyes, covering them, as I waited for sharp, nasty nails to dig into me and teeth to bite down into my flesh. But that didn't happen. I listened to its rapid thud, thud, thud in the gravel. It was in front of me, beside me, then beyond me. The creature ran right past me full speed. I uncovered my eyes, almost unsure at first. Then I stood back up and faced ahead. The creature had stopped, now about 30 yards ahead up the road. It was facing me again, I think. Then, after we stared at each other for a couple of moments, it walked off to the left of me and disappeared in the woods. Screw stealthiness at that point. I took off at a full run myself. I didn't stop until I made it through the front door, panting. Once again, I relayed my story to my wife, who was now scared for me, and told me she did not want me to run my mile around the loop, and instead, if I had to keep running, I could do it inside the fence at least. While that would make for a boring run, I agreed. The fence did make me feel safer, and I could bring the dog out there with me. But I'll tell you this, I wasn't about to go outside after dark for a long time. It's been about 9 months now. I would say I'm overdue for another sighting, but I don't think it's coming back. Or maybe I just hope it's not coming back. It never did show any signs of aggression. If anything, it showed signs of curiosity. It was sniffing around my fence and staring me down. To me, it was like it was just checking us out, wondering if these new people in its territory were dangerous, the same way I was wondering if this thing was dangerous. But I'm not going to believe that 100%. I don't want my guard down if I ever see the creature again. I'm afraid if I assume this thing is not out to get me, if I don't take it seriously if I see it again, I could end up a nice, sloppy, wet meal. If I ever do see it again, I'll be sure to let you know. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. This story takes place in the winter of 2016 to 2017. It was either December or January. I was 17 at the time. It was extremely early in the morning, almost 3 o'clock. I woke up suddenly to the sound of all the dogs in the neighborhood going insane. I tried to go back to sleep because it was a school night, but I felt a feeling of unease and I suddenly felt unsafe. I sat up in my bed and quietly went to the window and opened it. I heard howling. It kind of sounded like coyotes, but not so much. This was strange, of course. You don't usually hear or see wild animals that far into the city. At least, not too often. Even so, I knew that it wasn't really a coyote or even a wolf. It sounded kind of unnatural. I opened the curtains just enough to look outside, but not open enough for someone or something to look in. At the time, I didn't really understand yet that that wasn't how it worked. What I saw that night, I didn't realize until this year how lucky I really was. I saw these 2 large dogs run into the parking lot across the street. They stopped. These were not ordinary dogs. To best describe how they looked, take Sirius Black's Animagus form, but make them the size of a Mounties horse. They also had these glowing golden eyes. My eyes met with one of them. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Before I knew it, the dog turned its head to face the other. They then ran off into the night. I never really thought much of it until this year. I learned this year that I more than likely saw hellhounds, and based off of everything I've read, I'm lucky to still be alive. I honestly never thought I'd encounter something like that in North America, but now I know anything is possible in the modern era. I work in close protection, from UK to Europe to Iraq, and in hostile environments. Doing this can be stressful. When home and off task, I like to get into the hills in Scotland. I decided to do a one-night camp in a well-known popular hiking and climbing area by a place called Erriker. I loaded up the Jeep and my best friend, my dog Bear, who's a South African Burble. He's a large guard dog, if you know the breed. Very large, well over 60 kilograms, or over 130 pounds American. So we get there, I set up camp, and we're isolated. But there is a road in the distance. We go for a hike, then have a good night, settling down, and I cook up some big steaks for the both of us. I also have a rum or two. Soon it's bedtime. I brought a large tent this time, so I set up Bear's bed inside the sitting area, and I take the bedroom. I lock up the tent, and we're off to bed. Sometime later, I wake up to the noise of the tent being touched. I sit up, still in my sleeping bag, trying to work out what's going on. I then see the wall of my tent moving, being pushed in, and working its way towards me. I wish I could say I wasn't scared, but I was. I didn't know what to do, so I threw a big right hook through the wall of the tent, and I connected with something. But there was no noise, no yelp, no footfall, no running. I grabbed my axe and got out of the bedroom. Bear was still somehow sleeping. She was a guard dog, and an amazing one, usually. I then noticed the tent door was open at the top, like someone or something had peeked inside. I got out of the tent with Bear, looking for footprints or tracks, or even some lights on the nearby road, in case it was some sort of weird prank. But there was nothing, and I can't explain it. Heck, my guard dog didn't even hear anything. But I know I hit something. I put it down to maybe a loose sheep or something, but it's not really a farming area, and sheep don't really open doors and watch you while you sleep.